The rut, it's that magical term among whitetail hunters, something we look forward to and plan for all year long. But what is the rut? And what are some of the myths and misconceptions? Just be sure that you don't believe everything you hear.
You can never, ever just guarantee deer sightings, especially during the rut. I had everything set up for a longer shot, and then I looked out to my left, and here he comes. If you just want to have everything perfect, your hunting season will never be perfect.
Every whitetail hunter looks forward to hunting during those mythical November days. The leaves have fallen, the fog sets in, and the whitetail rut has begun. Now, some of us may think we know everything that occurs during the rut, but what if what we've been told isn't all true? Well, no worries. We're here to set the record straight. Myth number 1. Heat shuts deer down during the rut. Sure, why not? I'm good with an empty freezer this year too.
One of the biggest misconceptions about rutting whitetails is that heat is going to shut them down during the rut. This isn't true.
The rut occurs at the same time year after year because it's the amount of daylight reaching into a deer's eyes, the decreasing amount of daylight that triggers the rut. What does change is movement patterns.
I don't care if it's 90 degrees out or if it's 30 degrees out. Yes, it seems that deer will move a little bit more, bucks will be cruising a little bit more, but as long as those does are going, heat's not going to do it, and it's not going to be only at night. That doe needs to be bred when she needs to be bred, and if it's in the middle of the day, so be it. A buck's going to find her.
Myth number 2. Bucks will not eat during the rut.
You know, that's another one, is that people will say bucks aren't going to eat during the rut. They're too consumed with breeding, and that's all that's on their mind. Buck needs to eat just like any other mammal. He's going to be out there cruising. It might not be in the same vein. He might not be coming out to a food plot in perfect conditions, you know, in dusk or dawn or whatever, but he's still going to find those food sources. So you need to know the hot food sources that he's going to want.
Bucks will not eat during the rut. That's like saying you're not going to eat while you're watching the football game next Sunday afternoon. Baloney! You're going to eat and bucks are going to eat.
Myth number 3. Mature bucks do most of the breeding during the rut. Come on now, we all know what it's like to be a teenager.
Mature bucks do not do most of the breeding. As a matter of fact, if you look at a finely tuned herd, those bucks of all ages could be breeding, and what we know through DNA paternity testing with whitetails is that a large percentage of does are bred by yearling bucks. And this is the case often with multiple paternities. So if a doe has twin fawns, many times those twins have different fathers. Land of Whitetail is brought to you by
Myth number 4. If you bust a buck during the rut, you won't see him again in the same day or week. Yeah. Any excuse to be back on the couch.
There are a few hunters out there, maybe you, that think when they bump a deer, bust a deer, spook a buck, that buck is gonna leave during the rut and you're never gonna see him again. Man, don't even think that. Bucks have breeding on their mind during the rut. Sure, they're afraid of danger, sure, they'll run away from it, but that doesn't mean they're gonna leave that area, especially if there's a doe in heat. In fact, if there's a doe in heat, oftentimes it's the doe that'll spook first before the buck.
That buck is going to be cruising. And what we found with deer, especially mature deer, they kind of get a little bit loopy. He is going to be going from doe group to doe group to doe group, looking for receptive breeding partners, and he does not care. I mean, you might have busted him out of that tree stand. It could be an hour later. Here he comes back through because he's on the scent of yet another estrus doe.
Myth number 5. Only younger bucks will respond to scent drippers or doe urine during the rut. Have you even read an issue of Deer and Deer Hunting magazine?
I think with technology, people get jaded on it, and they think that you know, oh, I don't use scent because only yearling bucks are going to come to scent during the rut. Not true. I mean, ask Steve Bartilla, ask Mark Kaiser.
Never place a mature buck up on a pedestal. He will fall for the same tactics that a young buck will. Maybe not as often, maybe not as occasionally, but they do fall from. And scents are a good example. If you've got a dripper going over an active scrape, there's nothing that says a big buck won't pause there, check that scrape out, and maybe deposit his own calling card. The same with a scented wick, some spray misted out on some grass. Whatever type of scent you're using, a mature buck is just as likely to fall for that ruse as any young buck on the block.
Myth number 6.
The phases of the rut is probably one of the most misunderstood aspects of hunting whitetails. You know, when we talk about the different phases, the breeding, the chasing, the tending, there are definite phases of the rut, but they don't happen in nice cookie cutter order.
There are very many variables throughout the rut. Some does come into heat early, some does come into heat late. The bulk do come into heat in one big time period that's a little over a week long, and that's for survival of fawns later in the spring.
We try to put that into that context for our own purposes. That's not how it works, because deer are individuals, and you know, you're out in the wild, does are going at different times. They're coming into estrus at different times, so you might have some chasing activity here, you might have some breeding activity here, you might have some searching activity here, and it could all be within the same general area, the same general property.
One of my favorite states to hunt, Nebraska. Now, I don't get to hunt it every year, but it's a destination that you should look at as a whitetail hunter. Most of my hunting in Nebraska is from an invite from my good friends at Hornady. Now, Hornady makes some great ammunition, and they've got some good hunting properties that they hold for some of their good friends. I guess I'm on the list. And so I got an invite to come this year and enjoy some of the best river bottom hunting around for Nebraska whitetails. First morning out, I was in a platform stand I knew well. I'd hunted it several times over the course of the years. I'd never shot a buck out of that platform, but I had shot some good bucks. In fact, the best, all-out, best-scoring Nebraska buck I ever killed came from a field just a few hundred yards from the platform I was in. So I knew the area could produce, it had good flow, and there was one important factor right behind me, a spring-fed stock dam. And those deer were using it. I could tell right away at sunrise, deer were filing into there to get their last drink before moseying off to bedding areas. It was right then too at sunrise that a nice buck tempted me. He come chasing through the area following a doe. In fact, the funny thing is, they ran up close to where I parked my truck. I could have sat in my truck and shot this deer. He ran right up to it. And then they made their way towards me. Now, when the doe split off, the buck kept coming and eventually passed within 100 yards of me and gave me the best show Mother Nature can provide. After that show, he moseyed off. Now, I was kind of thinking, did I goof up? Did I pass on a buck I should have shot? I mean, he wasn't a great big buck, but he was a representative buck of what's in the area. I could have filled my tag, had some nice venison, and been on my merry way to another whitetail destination. But Mark always likes to push it on these hunts. Yeah, that's a bad deal for Mark to do. I did. I passed that buck, let him go on, and started looking for one notch better on the Nebraska scale of whitetail bucks. Day 2, I crawled into that blind way in the dark, set up, opened the blind windows carefully, was all set for basically nothing. Man, talk about a slow morning. Now, the temperature was cold in the morning. It was probably right at freezing, but the forecast was again for close to mid-70s. So had the deer been looking at the hunt stand hunting app too and reading the forecast?
think I'm gonna go back to bed.
I don't know, but they sure didn't show. We saw one yearling doe crossing an open field and then one small buck slipping through. I went to the platform on the third day, the same platform. I like that spot. And I'll be honest, it gives me flexibility to shoot in a 360-degree area. And of course, I've got a camera person with me. So there's that flexibility too. When you sandwich yourself in a little blind, pop-up blind, or even an enclosed blind, you're kind of giving yourself only a narrow area to shoot. This open blind, hey, it benefited the filming, it benefited the shooting. It was gonna benefit the hunt, right? Except this morning, nothing. I mean, at shooting light, it was as dead in there as a mall during the COVID crisis. Nobody was going there. The deer were just not moving. And then, about 2 hours into the sit, something was starting to happen out on this field. The field where I'd shot my biggest buck, I saw a group of 4 does. First it was 2, and then it grew to 4, and they started coming into some timber below me. I immediately saw movement and told the cameraman, get ready. Here come a young doe, and right behind it, that little buck. But they were chasing, and that's good. Any activity, running through the woods usually attracts attention. Those 2 came through, I judged the ranges, I looked through my 6-hour scope, figured I could make shots through several shooting lanes. I was ready. Then I kept my focus out to where they went, because I figured that big open area where they were chasing around, a deer could see them from 300, 400, 500 yards away, even in the deep timber there. I had everything set up for a longer shot, and then I looked out to my left, and here he comes. Shooter, I said, not quite that loud to my cameraman. I said, a shooter's right there. Got ready to shoot, and he was so close, I forgot I had my rifle scope on 12 power for the longer shot. But luckily, the buck was just trotting along perfectly. I could follow him even with my scope on the higher power. He hit the first opening, no way to shoot because it was too small. Second opening, same thing, no way to shoot. It was just too short a gap. When he hit the third opening, I said, you got him? Got the go-ahead from the cameraman, and I gave that buck the Kaiser coyote bark. I jacked another one in and got ready to shoot again as the buck rounded a corner, and just as I was about to shoot, I could see him teetering to an end. When it happens fast. Boy, look at the body on this buck. Oh my goodness. That's what we were hoping for in Nebraska right here. I'm gonna brag a little bit. That was a spot-on shot on a moving buck. Heart shot him, perfect heart shot right through the shoulder. That ELDX Hornady bullet is great for everything, from pronghorns all the way up to moose. Now, I haven't shot a moose with it yet, but I have shot elk with it, and its expansion is unreal. This buck here, like I said, I'm sure it was a complete pass-through. This is the side I hit him on. We'll roll him over here in a minute if I'm man enough to, because this dude's a brute. This is Deer and Deer Hunting TV at its best.
Land of Whitetail is brought to you by pins are nice and bright right there. And that's one thing about hunting out of a blind, especially these Banks blinds are really nice, but when you're hunting out of any blind with archery equipment, when you get in here and you do some practicing, you want to make sure that you got good clearance and you can see your pins. Normally you're doing that during daylight, right? And what fools us is that no matter where you're hunting, if you're in an enclosed situation, you lose shooting light really fast. And even though these windows will bring in a lot of light, your pins are not always going to reflect that in low light situations. So these blinds are nice. These Banks blinds, this is a stump 4. You know, they got windows all the way around. I don't care what type of blind I'm hunting out of, I don't like to leave all those windows open for scent, for sight, that type of thing. But as it starts getting dark out, before it even gets to that point, I will just rig up a curtain behind me to let some of that natural light come in. And on those fiber optic pins, it makes a huge difference. If I have it completely dark in here, and even though I can see out there and I can see the deer, when I come to full draw, invariably, even with a lighted sight where they're legal, they blend together. Those sights just kind of all glob together, and it's really hard. If I have a little bit of natural light coming over my shoulder to where I expect to shoot, it's gonna make those pins that much more defined. It's gonna allow me to have a better aiming spot. Try it, I think you'll be surprised. Just a little bit of light behind you and above you to make that sight picture that much better.
Whitetail hunters, if they're going shopping for ammunition and specifically bullet choices,
Sure.
they've got a ton of choices out there.
Lots of choices. Too many choices.
Too many
For a lot of
choices.
people, yeah.
So what can you tell us maybe about 2 or 3 of Hornady's top bullets? Like, you
Yeah.
know, the Outfitters, the GMX, the Precision Hunters, the ELDX.
That's right. So those are 2 very popular bullets that we load in ammo. The Outfitter line, those are all loaded with like a tough GMX bullet, and that's a copper alloy bullet. There's no lead in it, so some people are required to use that.
Like California.
Exactly. Some people prefer to because copper alloy bullets are super tough. They expand, but they maintain their mass and they tend to penetrate real well. On the flip side, you can have your lead core bullets like the ELDX and many others that they tend to open up a little faster. They may lose a little bit of weight. They may not penetrate as far, but they tend to cause more damage when they go in, a bigger area of damage. So it kind of has a little bit of personal preference to it. So there's a lot of different options out there. The ELDX is nice because some people are on the cutting edge of longer range hunting and so on. They will benefit from the ELDX as far as the high BC and the terminal performance at distance, but it also works up close as well. Outfitter, GMX, hard-hitting, deep penetration.
So in brief, you guys got a lot of good bullets.
There's a lot of good choices out there. Yeah.
All right.
All right.